to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Have you ever had a leader in your organization and they were doing an amazing job at inspiring their teams and you wanted to clone them? Well, guess what? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today on our Talent Optimization Podcast. And we have a special guest with us. We have Joy Duce with us today, and Joy is a business executive with 20 years of experience helping organizations enable their strategic business objectives through talent management and organizational effectiveness solutions. One of the things that Joy does incredibly well is Joy is really able to see the strategic aspects that executives need inside of an organization and blending it into the HR infrastructure. So Joy, we are thrilled to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, are you ready to talk about some of those amazing leaders in our organization and how we can, create some strategies for those that aren't quite there yet?
Absolutely.
Great. So, one of the key things that we look at when we look at leaders, and these are typically supervisors and managers, and I know sometimes we joke and say they are not leaders. I'm going to call them a manager today because, man, they're managing and they're not leading anything, right?
Yes.
So that key distinction between that manager and leadership. But I'm so curious, what are some of those key things that you see great leaders do?
Yeah. So excellent question, Tracy. Great leaders at the core of it, they really walk the talk. So every single day they are exemplifying the image and the portrayal of what leadership is. And they're truly the people that individuals want to follow. They're the ones that team members say, I would dive through the muddy trenches for this person. I am loyal to this individual, versus a leader who at the first exit ramp turns around and everybody's left the highway to stop following them. And so it's critical. It's oftentimes the things that you're doing when nobody is watching that really exemplify true leadership and the type of individual that people want to follow.
Absolutely. And as leaders in the organization that so often are supporting new leaders coming in, either through, HR programs or through succession planning programs, what are some of those key traits and how do we support individuals of developing those?
So one of the key attributes to success is creating an environment where it's safe and acceptable to make mistakes. That is really how individuals who are growing into a leadership position learn, is that we make a mistake, we dissect it, we're treated respectfully throughout the process of that dialogue, and we learn from it. So an environment free of judgment or negative treatment where it's truly safe to make a mistake. In addition, an experienced leader who's bringing someone up with them, it's truly putting your arm around them and letting them see what it's like to follow in your shoes, inviting them to those key meetings, introducing them to those key contacts. And then subsequently, once you feel that they're set up for success in certain venues, beginning to step back. And that's oftentimes where we see a miss in certain circumstances. Individuals, and by human nature, it's difficult for us to let something go. But the critical point in time is when you've laid that foundation, you've put your arm around that person, you've let them make mistakes in a safe environment and learn from them. And then you step back and you allow them to shine. And you also allow them to take their own path, because the reality is they're probably not going to do everything exactly the same way you did, but it's okay. There's different derivatives, there's different innovations, and we have to be okay to step back and let them own it as their own piece of the puzzle at that point.
I love that approach, right? Because it's not necessarily about the how, but it's about the outcomes that we're getting in an organization. And I think something that is a key distinction is that difference between an output and an outcome, right? Like
Yes.
that output is, hey, I attended 5 meetings or I did XYZ. And that outcome is, hey, we actually closed that sales, or we, were able to increase our retention by 13% or whatever that is.
Yes, 100%.
So I'm curious, as we talk about these things, it sounds really easy when we're doing it, but how do you actually do it? How do you be that leader that is supporting that individual to create that environment where mistakes are okay, when we still have very specific deadlines and outcomes that must be met?
Yeah, great question. Really it comes down to truly making it the most important initiative you are embarking on and truly dedicating time to it. So many times I see there's a really hard desire to do it, but in reality, you already have a full day, you already have a full schedule. And so what often takes a back burner, unfortunately, is the development of that individual. So we have to be very careful that we're not just sort of dragging them along for the ride, that they're actively participating, that we're giving real quality, timely feedback. Individuals in the absence of feedback are going to have the impression and the assumption that what they're doing is correct. And so if we don't share that feedback and course correct real time, they're going to continue those same behaviors because their impression is, well, I didn't hear anything. I must be doing this right. And so if you're truly going to be a leader and guide and mentor and grow additional leaders with you, you have to segment off time for that development. And the time is not, again, just dragging them to every meeting with you and in the car ride afterwards saying, do you have any questions? We're running to the next one. Really, really sharing that feedback. And then the critical point is stopping and listening and hearing their insights and their questions and their feedback. Because we also have to be realistic. Sometimes the path the person has chosen may not be the path that ultimately, once they're in it, is the path they want. And that's okay. So instead of continuing to develop an individual, they go to 2 or 3 meetings, you're giving feedback, give them an opportunity to course correct and maybe go in a different direction if it's not a long-term fit for them.
And that's such a great point, because so often, especially when we're working with clients about succession planning or promoting an individual inside of an organization, they're really, really amazing at doing the task, right? They're an amazing tactician, but yet they're not a fantastic strategist, right? And to step into that, right? And that takes a completely different skill set and a completely different behavioral mindset of, all right, I'm going to go do this thing over and over versus, okay, now I have to see about, here's all of the 700 different balls in the air. Where do they all kind of connect together? And when we're working with those individuals and we choose to promote them, are there specific things that you found throughout your career, Joy, where you're like, hey, this is somebody that, typically is somebody that would be great for that, or sometimes it's not? What have you found?
Yeah. So one of the biggest misses that I've seen when working with clients or working internally is we oftentimes choose the person without asking them. So 9 times out of 10, I may say, well, if I won the lottery tomorrow, Tracy's my successor. And then I often say to the client, does Tracy know that? Well, no, but she'd do it. So we also have to be realistic that the choices that we make for people may not be the same choice. They may not want that role. They may not want that level of responsibility. And so the first key attribute is actually having that dialogue. I'd like to consider you as my successor. Here's what that looks like. you're also simultaneously securing that talent. How many times have you heard a client say, oh my God, Joy resigned. She's the next whoever. And I say, did you ever tell her that? Well, no, but she knew. So it's also embedding that level of security, not only for the individual, but also for the organization, that there's alignment, that you are the successor. And then to your point, Tracy, I've used tools such as predictive index, for example, to really determine if this person and the skills and abilities that they're bringing to the table truly correlate to the job. By using the tool to have an unbiased look at the true correlation to what they have, to what the job requires, can be critical. And oftentimes we choose successors because they're amazing technical experts in their specific discipline, or they've been here the longest. But when you truly use a tool such as predictive index to see if there is that appropriate correlation, sometimes it doesn't match up. And it's really key to look at that and address it appropriately before you continue down the path.
Absolutely. And I love how you just brought up, we need to ensure that the individuals are fit for the job that the organization needs, right? The other thing is, hey, the team that individual is stepping into, are they a match specifically for that team? And they may be the right person, but yet we may need to take a look at who is the team around them for the strategy that we're really looking to execute. And that's something that's so incredibly important, is it's not just the fit to the role, it's the fit within the team, and ensuring that that individual has the support system, really that kind of that platinum rule, that person's going to be managed and promoted within, mentored in the way that they need to be mentored for the best success for them.
Absolutely. It's not the individual leader or the organization that gets a vote in that person's success. It's their colleagues, it's their team. And that can oftentimes be a detriment if the team is not rallying around that decision. If they can't get the appropriate buy-in and support, that could drastically hurt the opportunity for that person to be a successful successor to the incumbent.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you just talked about a little bit earlier is the communication. And so often we don't communicate as leaders. It's in our head and we just assume, like through osmosis, people know, right?
Yes.
So can you chat with us a little bit about how does that communication and the different types of communication really ensure that an individual leader will be successful?
Yeah. I often said if I could get better at my mind reading skills, I'd be much, much better at my job. There's two key attributes. There's not only the communication with the individual who is coined or determined to be the successor. It's setting those expectations, it's setting the appropriate timeline, laying out the investment, and also hearing them, as I alluded to before, so they can make an educated decision if this is what they want to do. Mm-hmm. The other side of the coin that I often see neglected is 9 times out of 10, there's someone else who thought they were the successor, who prior to an acquisition was told they'd be the next whomever. And now the roles have changed. The game has changed. There's more talent after an acquisition. We oftentimes significantly neglect what I'll call that number 2. So they're not the successor at this point in time, but they're extremely valuable to the organization. Those are very difficult conversations to have. And human nature has us shy away from them. And in the absence of having them, most oftentimes that individual will leave, which provides some pain. And or if they stay, they're not bought into supporting the new leader because they were traditionally peers. And now not having that dialogue and promoting the peer to the successor position leaves the other person in a role in which they just cannot support that decision because there was no dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we've kind of gone all the way around is how do we inspire individuals to be great leaders? And what are some of those key things when we're bringing a new leader into the organization? And I'm really curious because we have, a really strong base of human resource professionals that listen to our podcast. What's one key takeaway for the HR folks listening in today?
So coming at it from an HR perspective, I think it is critical that we are having that dialogue early and continuing to have that dialogue. When choosing a successor, there's so many factors that can change that relationship needs to be reevaluated consistently as well. And so my takeaway to the human resources professionals is, a key contribution on your part is shepherding the process, but also we don't check a box and that's our successor for life. The organization can evolve. Other people can leave, other people can join. Personal circumstances could dictate the willingness or the desire to take that on. So this isn't a one and done. An HR professional should lead that continuous, ongoing dialogue for these conversations on a regular basis.
Great. Thank you so much for that, because it's really shifting from that tactical HR role of we're going to check the box and move things along, which is important, to what is the overall impact of this and how does this also impact the productivity and the profitability of our organization?
Absolutely.
And the second group that we really have listening into our podcast is our executives and our CEOs that are going, okay, what's all this HR stuff? And how do I ensure that I'm implementing this and that we're on the same page as we integrate these things? And, we talk with so many of our executives that succession planning is something that incredibly, incredibly important to them because they want to retire.
Yes.
So what is that key takeaway that you specifically have for our executives listening in?
Yes, everyone would love to retire and leave an amazing legacy. What I will say is retirement is not the only opportunity for succession.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be having that dialogue real time and consistently in the event that something occurs that you are no longer there. You owe it to your team, you owe it to your company, you owe it to your board and your investors, whatever the financial setup is, that you have a plan in place that continues to evolve for succession. And I will say, you should most certainly be leveraging your human resources professional, or if you don't have one, outsourcing that to someone who is well qualified to help you navigate that dialogue, to help you assist in moving the process forward, and to keep it top of mind. Because I've seen so many circumstances with my clients where an accident occurs, an illness occurs, and it cripples the legacy of that organization because either no one wants to be the successor, everyone wants to be the successor. And so as you walk away from this podcast, I really challenge you to represent succession planning as a top priority and not a one and done. This is the continued evolution of dialogue as the organization and the people evolve, and leveraging the support of your human resources professionals in order to execute.
Great. Joy, thank you so much for your insight and the specifics that we chatted through today about communication and ensuring that it's not a one and done and that the individuals are in the right role and really involved in that entire process. So I'm curious, if our listeners want to find you, learn more about you and how you serve, where can they find you?
Yes. First, Tracy, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been my pleasure. I am Joy Duce. I am with the firm of Baker Tilly. For those of you who aren't aware of Baker Tilly, we are a multinational public accounting and consulting firm. You can reach me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way under Joy Duce, or via email joy.duce, DUCE @bakertilly.com.
Great, Joy, thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.